presenters. Kickstarter Insolvable, which begs the question, what's the question? There are two questions that most indies and games companies and small producers have about Kickstarter. First of all, should we do a Kickstarter? And the second question is, if we do a Kickstarter, what should we do with it? Hello. That's not. Why is that not? That does not seem to be progressing my slides. Any idea?
Mouse, maybe?
Mouse?
Let's double check. Yes,
Aha! What's pressing it? Right. He's magic fingers. It's haptic interfaces and stuff. Okay, so my second space, which is a game consultancy. I run 3As in space. We're a AAA company. I like to pretend. We do all kinds of stuff. We critique and evaluate games and games pitches and games proposals. We work with large corporations developing games, or advising them on using games as part of branding and marketing and training. Clients, everyone from the very small up to... There was a moment last summer where we were working for Shell and Greenpeace simultaneously, which was a bit of a headbutt, but thoroughly entertaining. And last spring, in fact, I did a Kickstarter, which is why I'm here, because I'm suddenly an expert about it, having done one. But I also I study Kickstarter, I study the crowdfunding generally, and I share offices with a company called Pelgrane Press. You may not have heard of them. They're a tabletop RPG company. Such things do still exist. They've run 2 Kickstarters in the last year, both of which have ended up between 2,500 and 3,000% funded. That is, the first one they asked for $3,000, they ended up with $93,000. The second one they asked for $4,000 and ended up with somewhere just north of $100,000. This is one of the great things about Kickstarter, which I'll get to in a moment. But while I'm here and have your attention, Game Camp! I'm Game Camp. I'm actually the chair of Game Camp, or I think of myself more as a chaise longue. Game Camp is an unconference. It happens here, or actually the other side of the road. It's a one-day event. Come along. You can run panels. Just turn up on the day and run a panel. It's brilliant. There's games to play, all kinds of demos going on. Lovely lunch, free drinks. It's 12 quid. Tickets on sale. Tickets went on sale at 11 o'clock this morning. We have already sold more than 25% of them. So I recommend you get in right now. Back to the subject. Kickstarter, I'm convinced, is a science. I think that's why I said it's solvable. In scientific terms, in mathematical terms, it's solvable. You can work out how to optimize it and absolutely make the best output you can. If you look at Kickstarter, there's a lot of good projects on it, good project pages, interesting things that people are trying to make that don't get funded. Some of them, if you dig down through Kickstarter, this is really interesting, because page through and page 3, it starts at the first page you get. Just look at London area ones, that cuts down the search enormously. And you page through all the big ones that are hitting target and massively excelling target. And you get kind of 10, 15 pages in, and there's nice looking projects for interesting things with literally no funding at all. They have not attracted a single backer. Clearly they're doing something very wrong. I hope, tell you what some of that is. So this is a bit of a nutsy-boltsy talk about how to use Kickstarter, why it may be right for you, why it may be wrong for you. John is when you say something's a science, people go, oh, it's a science. I know science. Science is kind of, what did Arthur C. Clarke say? Any sufficiently advanced science is indistinguishable from magic. Kickstarter is not magic. Oh, one other thing about me. When I do a PowerPoint, it's black text on a white background. Code. No fancy transitions. Typeface is called Windsor, incidentally. I bloody love it. It's not magic. It will not solve all your problems magically. It will not raise the money for you. You're still going to have to do an awful lot of work. Kickstarter is a channel. It is not magic in a bottle. Most importantly, it will not subsequently make the game for you, particularly if you overpromise what that game is going to be. I'll come on to that. Certain things. Do people know Kickstarter? Have people... Okay, who's back to Kickstarter in the room? That's pretty healthy. Who has run a Kickstarter in the room? A few of you. Okay, if you think what I'm saying is bollocks, feel free to interrupt. I'm happy to take criticism.
Mine failed.
Yours, oh, okay. In that case, shut up.
I recruited a failed one.
Rebooting failed once, we'll come on to that. Is there anyone who's unaware of crowdfunding and Kickstarter? You've not come across it at all? Oh, thank God, we don't have to start with that. So, things that Kickstarter likes and doesn't like. It's the audience it has have certain predilections. Certain things tend to do really well, certain things don't. You will notice games from unknowns, a lot of lists. I'm not going to say that a game from a project from an unknown games producer is going to necessarily fail, but you are not likely to do as well as if you had an established creator attached to it. Do you know any established creators? Might they get attached to your project? Might they in fact lend their name to your project? Other things you should probably pay attention to. Nostalgic IP. Can you license an IP? If you've got a pre-existing idea for a game, you've got a game that's been in your head since you were 12 years old, and you really only want to make it, you're looking for funding, obviously licensing something, licensing a property, and it doesn't have to be an existing game, it can be almost anything. But it's a very good way to stir up interest in a project and get people attached to it. We'll come back to that. Cthulhu as well. If you can build Cthulhu into your game, just do, you'll probably add about another 1 or 2% to it. And that's the trick of a lot of Kickstarters. There is no magic bullet. There is no one thing you can do to a Kickstarter project that will make it massively successful. There are an awful lot of little things that will add between 0.5% and in some cases up to like 20% of your take. If you present it really well, if you do things, if you operate the Kickstarter properly, it's a game of maximising those tiny little percentages, building in a lot, as many of them as possible. One thing not to do is to try and kickstart a book on how to do a successful Kickstarter. There have been two to my knowledge and they both failed. Kickstarter does not like smart asses. Okay. So, these are a few projects that have done well recently. I realised as I handed the memory stick to Byron that this is actually for the last time again it's called, which is about educational games. So, these are educational examples. Kano, build your own computer kit, aimed at kids, based on the Raspberry Pi. They've not really built an awful lot of their own hardware. Asking for, you'll note, $100,000, made $1.5 million. That's pretty tasty. Of course, the great thing about Kickstarter is, compared to a VC or an angel fund, you go to an angel fund or a bank and you'll say, I want 20,000, and if you're successful, that's how much they'll give you. You go to Kickstarter, you say, I want 100,000, they'll give you $1.5 million. And there is one string attached to that $1.5 million, which is you then have to build the bloody thing and deliver it to everyone who gave you money. As strings go, that's not a terribly bad one. That's actually pretty good. It's a lot better than handing over 30%, 40% of your company to a third party who may not get what you're doing, or a ruinous interest rate at the bank who may call in the loan at any time. Another project that did well this is, again, it's a box game. They did very well on Kickstarter. Asked for $25,000 to do a little box game based on Logo, if you remember Logo, the programming language of turtles. $631,000. That's pretty impressive. I'd be happy with that. And this is a much lower level. This is a tabletop RPG based around learning Korean. As you play the game, I think the way it works is that the names of the spells are in Korean, so you learn some of that stuff. But again, only ask for $3,000. That's small beans. Make 34. That's tasty. You can do something. So suddenly, what was a tiny little project has become a quite serious game. Right. Typical Kickstarter breaks down into 6 points. I don't always read off my slides. You can probably read those yourself. But basically, work out what the hell it is you actually want to do. Do you have this game in your head? Do you just want to do a successful game to get your mini studio off the ground and recognised? This is where the possibly licensing an IP comes into place. So up your Kickstarter page, that's a science in itself, pre-publicised like a bastard. Run the campaign. Brief word on campaign lengths, because I otherwise technically forget to mention this. You can set a Kickstarter campaign to run, I think, up to 75 days. Don't run it at 30 days. We'll come on to that. Finish up and then deliver. Delivery, surprisingly hard for a lot of people. I looked at all the Kickstarters I backed the other day. The first 5 I backed, one delivered what I was expecting on time. One delivered on time, but it was shit. One failed to fund, and the other 2, and these are projects from 2011, have yet to deliver. One of them is actually a documentary film. It's been made, it's been shown, but they're contractually not allowed to send out the DVDs yet. And the other one is a graphic novel, And they just fucked it up, basically. I mean, the graphic novel exists, and it looks really nice, but they haven't calculated, my guess is, they've not admitted this, they've not calculated the shipping costs properly, and they've got completely stuck, and they cannot afford, on the money they raised, which was quite a lot, to actually ship the things. At least they're an American project, and I'm over here. Happens a surprising amount. We'll come on to that. This is the big mistake that people make with Kickstarter. This is the problem I was talking about. This is why some projects get literally no funding. This is why a project that a cousin of mine by marriage is running at the moment is not going to fund, because they assumed that Kickstarter has an audience. Kickstarter has a small audience of people who just browse through Kickstarter. It does the social stuff pretty well. You probably get those notifications if you back to Kickstarter already, that so-and-so in your friends' network has just backed this Kickstarter, and you probably should back it too, or it crops up on Twitter, or whatever else. Kickstarter will not bring you an audience of any significance. What Kickstarter does is it allows you to tap into an existing audience and allows them to throw money back at you. How do you find that existing audience? Well, if you're an established creator, then you've probably got one. One of the reasons I did a Kickstarter, it was supposed to be a little Kickstarter, it was supposed to take the temperature of my social worth. Because I've been out of tabletop gaming, it was a tabletop game, for a little while, and I wanted to see if people remembered who I was. So I asked for £3,000 to finish off an idea I had. I made £24,000, which was a lot more than I was expecting. So apparently I did still have some social worth and some social networks. But if you don't have those kind of connections, if you're fresh out of college, if this is your first game, how do you tap into an existing audience, or you can tap into an existing community? This goes back to what I was saying about licensing an IP. It doesn't have to be an IP that anyone owns. You can base a game on an out-of-copyright work. Do I think that a Kickstarter game about the Three Musketeers right now would do pretty well? I do! I think there's a lot of interest in that IP. There's an awful lot of value out there. Failing that, there's an awful lot of old games just languishing there. You could probably pick up the rights to do a remake for $1,000 up front and a few percentage points on royalties. Books, indie comic strips, web comics, stuff like that. Just find a way to tap into an existing community and get them interested, and that will get your Kickstarter, if not actually funded, then at least well on the way to it. Where are we? How to set your target, how to know how much money you're going to need to raise on Kickstarter. Obviously, there's a budget for your project, obviously, and you'll get to need to cost that out very, very thoroughly. Plus Kickstarter's fees. For some reason, this presentation is saved as a PDF, and it's lost all the apostrophes and inverted commas. This becomes significant later. I apologise for that. Kickstarter's fees, that's about 4% to Kickstarter and then 4% to cover credit card transactions, so you're immediately down about 8%. Cost of all back rewards. This is why people pledge to Kickstarter. They may pledge because they completely bloody love your project, but mostly they're pledging for the stuff that they're going to get at the end, the cool exclusive stuff that no one else will have, or at least no one else will have for a while. That's why people pledge. Cost it all out. You guys have a tremendous advantage. It's likely what you're going to be producing is digital games. They are digital. Your shipping costs are zero. Your production costs, once you've actually programmed a game, are zero. You don't have to go to manufacturers in China and ship everything from China through customs officials to the place of your choice, and then ship it out to punters, because shipping is really expensive. I've sent out some art prints as one of the rewards for my Kickstarter last week. Do you know that to send a sheet of A4 card in a card-backed envelope to the USA costs £4.50? That is actually more than it cost me to print the art print. Advertising. People advertise Kickstarters now. We are no longer in the first blush of excitement about crowdfunded campaigns. You have to convince people to back them. They're not going, ooh, this is exciting and novel and new. We will experiment with this thing. No, people are jaded. People like me have backed an awful lot of campaigns that haven't yet delivered. Or they've heard about big campaigns that have completely failed to deliver, that have gone fat. The big one, I think the biggest one was Diaspora, the social network, that I think raised something like $500,000 and never delivered, and then the lead guy killed himself. It's a sad story. It got a lot of publicity. But people advertise, banner ads. If you're into tabletop gaming, if you ever go to Board Game Geek, every single advert on Board Game Geek these days is someone advertising a Kickstarter. And your time. This was covered very nicely earlier on. Cost out your time. Your time has value. Never ever think it doesn't. If you see a 1p piece, my favourite example, if you see a 1p piece on the floor, should you pick it up? Someone said no. If it takes 5 seconds to bend down and pick it up, you're working at £7.20 an hour. I would suspect that a lot of you indie games developers working on your game will be working for less than that. Cost down your time, it has value. And before you go in, know exactly how you are going to build and to deliver your project. And, this is not factuous at the bottom, Kickstarter doesn't like people going in going, I've got this lovely idea for a thing, throw money at it. That's not the way to get back. The way to get back is to say, I have put in 2 years' work on this thing already, and it's bloody great, but I just need another X thousand pounds or X thousand dollars to finish it. That shows that you've already put in the effort. People will get behind you on that because they're excited. This thing mostly exists. They can help you just get that last mile. A lot of Kickstarter, a lot of the tricks of Kickstarter are those little psychological games like that. It's games of persuasion, games of finance as well, which I'm going to come on to. The trouble with Kickstarters is, this is a fantastic thing. Can you read that? Everyone, I'll read it. A notable amount of Kickstarters go, the banks wouldn't give me a loan, bank my project, and I will proceed to show you exactly why. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of those, and those tend to be the pie in the sky ones as well. So we've got an idea for a thing, we have no fucking clue, really. And you're reading between the lines, you're never going to say you've got no fucking clue, but it becomes fairly apparent. Who is familiar with Super Retro Squad? Anyone? Anyone heard of this? Anyone back it? This was supposed to be a platform game based on classic characters that looked like classic Nintendo characters, but weren't actually. And they asked for 10 grand and made 53. That's respectable, that's pretty good. You could probably do a decent game like that. What you don't do is buy a house, move people from all over America to work on your game for no money, for royalties, and 2 years later admit that you actually had no fucking idea what you were doing. Massively overpromised on the game. 45 levels, 9 worlds, 2 separate musical styles, online multiplayer, and then they were going to make a series of them for $50,000. That's £30,000. That's one person for a year. They took 2 years to fuck it up. Seriously, hunt this down online. This is just 2 paragraphs of him apologising. The thing goes on for hours. And if you know anything about games design, you will piss yourself laughing because he had no fucking clue going in and made every conceivable mistake. And it's just, if you have made those mistakes, it's like, yes, you suffered too, you little bastard. But the trouble is, this is the problem with a lot of Kickstarters. You have to convince people that you can do the game, and to convince them that you can do the game, you have to know how to do the game. Reward levels. Setting up the page. I should have had a big page that said setting up the page. When you go to set up the page, that is basically your advert, your exploration, your prospectus, it's everything. And it's a work of art, and you need to spend an awful lot of time on it. Reward levels are the rewards that the levels that people back you at. This is what I was saying about the psychological tricks. Upsell like you're on commission. Try to convince people, try to put the game should not be the cheapest thing that you offer. There should always be a £1 or a £2 level. Very few people will back it, it's psychologically important to be there. You should also have a top level £5,000 reward. Nobody will back that either, but it needs to be there. I'm not going to explain why because I'm in a hurry. There is a book, it's called Predictably Irrational. It's by a guy called Dan Ariely. It is the best proper economics book you will read. It will make you money. Seriously, I read it when I was selling, I was running a small publishing company, as well as other things, selling PDFs online. I read the first 2 chapters of Predictably Irrational. I went online, rejigged my entire pricing structures, I made bundles and stuff like that. My monthly sales went up 40% the next month and stayed up. It's an extraordinary book, it's really, really good. It was digital where possible for reasons of delivery. But the other thing I was saying, the upselling, the game should not be the cheapest, then it should probably be about item number 3 or 4 on the list. And immediately above, say it's at £20, you should then have a £25 level that's significantly better than just getting the game. And then at £35 or so, there should be something else that looks really tasty. What I did, my Kickstarter was for a game called Las Vegas. It's a tabletop RPG game, it's a big book format. So the basic book, 12 quid. But you can get a limited hardback for 20. Or you can get a limited hardback signed. I'm doing this from memory, I'm not sure if this was exactly it. Signed for 30. Signed and dedicated for 35. Or a few years ago, I did a game called The Extraordinary Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is a cult hit. You can have the game signed and dedicated to you by Baron Munchausen. For 45, I sold more £45 hardbacks than I did regular hardbacks. So softbacks, loads and loads of them, but you want to try and upsell people as much as you can. Convince them to go to spend double what they were planning to. Should you have a video on your page? Yes. Yes, you should. I'm told from those who have studied this that it will increase your take probably about 20% for a shitty video, up to 35% for a really good one. You should absolutely have a video. Break up the text on your page, otherwise it just looks like a wall of text and people won't read it. And once you have done putting your page together, and I've not even started to talk about stretch goals yet, please get someone who has done a successful crowdfunding campaign before, who has looked at this stuff, please get them to read over it and critique it for you and make suggest changes, and then make those changes. I've done 2 or 3 where I have gone, this doesn't work, and your gap here is too big, and this stretch goal is just unrealistic, and people won't believe you. And they go, I put it live this morning. It's like, fuck. Just a bloody idiot. And then the campaign fails. So anyway, yes, consultancy, surprisingly modest rates, lunch. Seriously, if you buy me lunch, this is a standing offer I have, I will critique your whatever it is, I'll talk to you about Kickstarter or whatever, for as long as lunch lasts. The better the lunch, the longer the critique. After that, you move on to acting. Back in the day when I was running a successful tabletop role-playing company, which is my background, I've been doing tabletop role-play since the 80s, some fucker turned up with sandwiches. I'm sorry, like, no, you get 10 minutes of my time, you can make it 12. Pre-publishing is really important because what people fail to understand about Kickstarter, along with many other things, is that Kickstarter is just as much about advertising your project as it is about raising the funding for it, raising awareness. 10 times the people who will back the page will look at it, but they'll go away remembering it. They'll remember that they've looked at it. Tell as many people as you possibly can. Get the word out there. Spread it around. Build, if you know bloggers, if you know podcasters, videocasters, all the rest of it, talk to them. Use all the social media, all the social networks you can. People will be completely sick of you by the time your Kickstarter is over, but then you don't mention it again. It's fine. Evangelists are really important. People who will spread the word for you. Get people really, really excited. If you can get one person. I mentioned my Baron Munchausen game. Now quite old, there's a reviewer called Ken Hite, he's American. He latched onto it at the event where we launched it, when no one was really talking about it. It was a 24-page game at a time when most RPG rulebooks were 200 or 300 pages. 24-page game. Ken Hite latched onto it and was literally grabbing people going, you have to look at this. And he is the reason that game is still in print. The problem with game press for Kickstarter these days is the message I'm doing at Kickstarter is no longer interesting. The balloon is off the roads. You have to find a new message, you have to find a new story, you have to make yourself, your studio, your game, whatever it is, interesting. I'm licensing this obscure game from the 1980s and bringing it back. Is an interesting story. You can get press based on that. I'm doing a Kickstarter, not so much. Right, the Kickstarter goes live. I have 5 minutes, I'm going to bat through this. Strong opening. Your first 5 days will be the most important days for your Kickstarter because you need to raise as much money as you possibly can. Las Vegas hit its target in 8 hours. If you can do that, people will start to talk about it. People get excited by successful Kickstarters. After that, it dies off in the middle. It goes completely flat. You raise bugger all money, quite often 2 figures a day, and you think this is all gone disastrously wrong. And then you have a strong finish the last 3 or 4 days. Again, you may make the same amount of money or even more than you did in the strong opening. This is the Wallis rule of thumb. If you can't raise a third of your original goal in those first 5 days, you are doomed. Your project will not fund. That's not a 100% rule. That's not true of every single Kickstarter. It is true of the vast, vast majority of them. If you're pretty sure your Kickstarter is not going to fund, if you are nowhere near target after 5 days, cancel the Kickstarter. Take it down, rejig it, relaunch it. Seriously, it is much, much better than letting the bloody thing tail away to reach a fraction of its goal. On Kickstarter, you don't hit your goal, you get nothing. On Indiegogo, you can Do it so that you get whatever people have paid. So you ask for, say, 30,000, you raise 10,000, you get that £10,000. Then you have to make a £30,000 game for £10,000. That is not a good option. This is KickTrack. KickTrack is one of the many tools which will help you run your Kickstarter campaign. It predicts how much money you're going to make. This is for one of the ones I mentioned earlier on, after 4,000 tabletop role-playing game. You'll see it's about 30% of the way through its run. KickTrack is predicting it'll make 160,000. The trouble is back here, KickTrack was predicting it would make $450,000. KickTrack's bollocks. People will tell you to use KickTrack. Do use KickTrack mostly to laugh at it. It's not great. When you do okay, forgot this slide. Delivering. Yes, you'll need to deliver the thing. Kickstarter will not help. What Kickstarter will give you at the end, it gives you the money, which is nice, but it gives you all your backer information as a bunch of CSV files. And they're a format that actually dates back to the 1960s. Another thing is that the CSV files do not have your backers' addresses in them and other crucial data. You can send out surveys to your backers, one per funding level, and that's it. If you go, oh no, I needed to ask you, no, you're fucked. So what you need to be using is BackerKit. BackerKit will take a small percentage, I think it's like 1% of your Kickstarter take, but we'll automate all that stuff and we'll just make it lovely. Really nice. There's an awful lot of third parties that are built up around the Kickstarter ecosystem. Make use of them. US fulfillment houses. If you've got physical stuff to ship, manufacture it in the US and ship it to the US. Something like 75% of my backers are in the US and Canada. I can't afford to ship to them from the UK, but I'm printing books. I can print on demand. I can print them in the States, just as easy as printing them here. Warehouse them in the States, ship them in the States. Saving me like 50% of the cost per book. Manufacture those to your largest market if you possibly can. As I say, if you're just doing digital rewards, don't worry about that, that's fine. But BackerKit, write it down again, underline it. If you are thinking of doing a Kickstarter, they are fantastic. And the most important thing is have fun. Kickstarter is amazing. I broke my F5 key during my Kickstarter, hammering it so hard to refresh the screen. I've been in this industry since 1984. I made my first professional sale. The month I ran my Kickstarter was the most fun I have had. Those years since 1984 include taking a Guinness World Record for gaming. Kickstarter, more fun than Guinness. Not good. But the other thing is it will, I should mention, so it will take a month of your life. Your running your Kickstarter will take a month. It's pretty much a full-time occupation. You need to stay in touch with your fans, you need to stay in touch with the backers, keep updating them, and once the project is done, keep updating them, particularly if you're running late, keep updating them, keep in touch with these people because they are now your people, they are now behind you, they have backed you, and when you come to do another project or another Kickstarter, you can notify them Kickstarter is good at that, and let them know and they will back you again. Kickstarter is a very, very valuable new part of the ecosystem of creating and funding games. It's also enormous fun. I recommend it to you wholeheartedly. If you want to talk to me about it, I'll be in the bar later and enjoying lunch all over London for the next few months. Many thanks.